Welcome to another episode of The Velvet Hammer.
And here we go.
Money.
Money. Money.
This is a taboo topic.
Yeah, money is taboo.
People hate this topic.
Money is the root of all evil.
Lawyers hate talking about it because they are worried that they're going to be labeled as
Ambulance chasers.
greedy lawyers.
Money hungry grubbers.
Ooh, the money grubbers. And yet, to be a plaintiff trial lawyer means that you must be able to talk about money to jurors. And so we're going to talk about money and we're not going to have any restrictions, but I do want to start off by talking about it technically from a trial lawyer perspective, and then talking about it more broadly if we choose, or we can save that for later.
From a trial attorney's perspective?
Yes.
I mean, when I was a public defender, I never asked for money.
No.
And part of what I feel about money that I've seen is that there's sort of a transactional flavor to it when it comes to plaintiff's practice.
I object.
I mean, I'm just saying, people are like coming out and going, look at my verdict.
Well, there's
Fantastic. Look at it. It's so shiny and it has so many zeros. There's something just a little bit transactional about it. And so that's my first thought.
All right, so even when we have attorney meetings and we have to go around the table saying what we think a case is worth,
Yes.
even when we talk to or hold focus groups and we're trying to see what people think a case value is worth, I agree. It is a weird part of what we do. It's kind of cold-hearted. It seems like it's avaricious. You know, we get pinned for all of this. However, you have to go back to what is plaintiff law? What are you allowed to do in civil law? And the reality is there is nothing you can do to show that someone else is culpable, nothing else in plaintiff law other than to give a jury verdict, which is a money verdict.
I agree. But
So in other words, you can't get back any body part.
yes,
You can't bring someone back to life.
of course you can.
You cannot undo a trauma.
No.
And you can't put anybody in jail.
No, you can't put any.
You can't take away somebody's license to practice medicine or to run some kind of a foundation. You can't do it in plaintiff law.
No, you can't do that.
Yeah. You can't ask a jury to say, this was very bad and we're very mad at you, and let the jury speak.
Yes, but all that being true, you still have to conduct yourselves in a social construct that you are creating that is money. It's a social construct, and we're talking about it in plaintiff's practice, but you've described to me kind of two distinct things, Karen. You're talking about it like how a trial lawyer sees themselves in relation to money, and then you're talking about it, about the concept of money being a value.
So two different issues.
Yes.
So which one do you want to talk about first?
I want to talk about the trial lawyer one. That's the one that's interesting to me.
Oh, well.
That's the one that's the...
All right. Well, let's go this way.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay. Well, we talk about the good, bad, and the ugly. So let's start off by, you get to choose. You want to talk about the good, bad, or ugly?
I want to talk about the ugly. What's the ugly side of, I'm totally all for getting verdicts and making clients feel whole.
Yeah.
That makes sense to me. I'm talking about how, like, the business and the practice of law is governed by verdicts, and how that says that's a great lawyer. Look at the verdict they got. That the measure of competence and the measure of capability is measured by verdicts. That interests me. That's an interesting model.
Well, start with that then. Tell us your position.
I think my position is that verdicts do not reflect the value that a lawyer brings to the practice of law or an issue. I don't think verdicts are reflective of that. I think that verdicts actually complicate that. And so a good example is, there used to be a big movement towards tort reform. And this was in the 80s here in Washington. And it's kind of picking up some gain again. For example, Georgia just passed some bills limiting plaintiffs' ability to get damages. And a lot of that is sometimes precipitated by the agents that are out there and how they reflect the trial lawyer practice, and they equate that value is the money that they make and how they present themselves to the larger community. Like they're wealthy. And so,
So you're being too vague for me.
Okay.
I need some examples, and I need to know who they is.
Okay.
Are.
There's no. If you go up and look and search the internet for plaintiffs lawyers, you'll see some plaintiffs lawyers who look very shiny and flashy, and they talk about verdicts. So that's a message they're just sending out to the public at large, and that defines the practice of law. There are others who don't do that. So I think that aspect is messaging that is sent out to the public about what the value of money is to the plaintiff's part, to a trial lawyer. Like, this is what it means. Does that make sense?
No.
Okay. I'll be even more specific. There are some law firms that you can go out and they look like they have jet engines, like private jets.
They do.
Okay. And then you see them, wearing like $2,000 or $3,000 suits. And that is an image that is sent out to the community. And it says the practice of law reflects this. That's a value that's shared within that social construct. Other lawyers don't do that. So there's a tension there.
Okay, well, the trial lawyer community is no different than humanity at large, in that there are some people that make a lot of money. There are some people that they can't survive on what they would make as a plaintiff trial lawyers. So they do other types of law too, like criminal law, family law, anything. And there's some lawyers that can't even make a job, make it practicing law, and they don't even practice law. They do other things. So there's a huge divergence. And you have established, you have groups of lawyers, you have solo practitioners, you have everything in the world, different type of configuration, just like in the bigger world.
Yes.
We have the billionaires who are not even the top. It's the billionaires at the top.
Yes.
And then you have people that live in the park, So I think it's hard to make generalities about lawyers and money, just as it is about people and money. I think that there are lawyers that focus unduly on money, and there are, and they are the attention grabbers because they can afford to get their word out about their value more. So that's what I think.
Well, attention grabbers. Okay, so that's a good one. I mean, we're doing a podcast, we're getting kind of attention. And then,
Well, from the 5 people that listen to the podcast. And Mike.
But, okay. All right. I like what you just did, which is you're talking about it like that was a fair criticism, backhanded criticism of me. Mo, you're making generalities about money, and I don't think you're being intellectually...
I think that you must have something in your mind, but you don't want to offend anybody, so you're not sharing with us exactly what you're talking about. So I'm trying to imagine what it is, but it's not concrete enough for me.
I think you're right. I think, to be honest, I think that it's my relationship with money. Like, money, to me, if you grew up poor, you have a relationship with money. You view lack of money as like lack of security and like emotional scarcity. You associate things with it, and then when you see when you grow up, you start to like make decisions thinking about money in a way that is influenced by your past. So I think part of where my bias, I mean, really, that's what it was. It was just like general bias. I was making generalisms, and you just kind of very kindly pointed it out, is that it's my issues with money that kind of like colors what I think about it. But you view money as respect.
So I do think, I think that I want to go back to the very beginning, which is, and use this as a way to talk about money here, of how I talk to jurors about money.
Okay.
Because how I talk to jurors about money is how I would talk to my neighbors about money. So I always hated to talk about money because we're kind of raised that that's rude. It's rude to ask people how much money you make or tell people how much money you make. I was raised in a household where, that was, by two intellectual parents, that money wasn't something that you talked about to other people. That would be a rude thing to do. And so I think I brought that into the practice of law. But as a plaintiff trial lawyer, you must talk about money. And so I went from hating it and being awkward about it, and tentative about it, which is the worst thing you can do. I've had juries that ordered more than I asked for, and I've like 2 or 3 times in my career I've had them order just what I've asked for, because probably I didn't ask for enough, but I don't know. But what I realized as the years passed, that I needed to get over this. And I used to think, well, there was some special way to do it, or a personality type, or these bold, male trial lawyer prototypes. They had no problem talking about money. But the way that they didn't never made me feel comfortable. A lot of it was constructs. A lot of it was they would come up with, like, how do you value pain and suffering?
Yeah.
And they would say, well, and I've done some of this stuff before. If I was to put an ad in the paper, and say, I want you to agree that we will take off your leg from the knee down, that you will have constant phantom pain, that you will need, this accommodation and that accommodation you will need, and that this job will be, let's be conservative and say it's an 8-hour day job, even though we know that you'll have the pain beyond the 8 hours a day and you'll have to sleep through it. What is the hourly rate of that? And then and then put that job in there for someone that would actually want that job at that hourly rate, and then multiply it by that. So there were these constructs, very popular, of how to get these big numbers. And I'm not saying that I won't do the construct, but I don't like the artifice involved in it.
Okay.
So let me finish. So let me tell you, because I want to tell you about how I do it, and then I want you to take over.
Okay.
So what I started doing more than a dozen years ago, but certainly a dozen years ago, was I immersed myself in how can I talk about money and naturally. Because I would listen to people talk about how they talked about money, and nothing rang true for me. Because I speak a lot around the country, and so I hear so many different people from all around the country at the seminars I present at talking about money. I never liked it. So, it was really a matter of me, first of all, understanding my relationship with money and feeling comfortable in it. That was number one, like money, which is not a comfortable subject. Even still, like, I don't tell people like how much money I make or what I do, but although I want to say that there's some things I do with money that are very calculated. For example, I want to show a certain amount of success to people that I want to motivate to become plaintiff lawyers who are minority and female. Like, I want to say, look, you can do this, because many people that practice my profession are not at the breaking even point. And it's hard. And I want them to see, look, you can be successful representing the little guy and not having to go to a big law firm.
Yeah.
And I'm proof of that. So here's how I learned how to talk, or what I did to learn to talk to jurors about money. I actually started going back into economics, which is not my favorite class in college, but I started to look at, like, what is money? So I started on one of those journeys of mine where it's kind of like my Jerry Seinfeld approach of all the stuff that you take for granted. Like, where did this come from? Why is it? What is it? So I started looking at, where is money? And so I started talking to jury about, it used to be just, I'll give you my thermos for your tennis shoes. There was barter. There was value placed upon it before there was this concept of money. What is it? It's an exchange of something that has value to another person that society then says is valuable to us, and you're basically monetizing what is important. You're monetizing what is important. You're placing a value on it. So I want to get them away from the thought of dollars and cents. I want them to look at human value, because I'm all about human, right? So what is human value? Human value is what we place on it. Well, now we're going to do something, which is we're going to be placing a value on health or loss. How do you do that? Because everybody says in jury selection, like, this is so hard, I don't know how I would ever do that. And I always say, well, when we get to the end of the case, I'll tell you how to do it. So I talk about comparative value. What are the values? What is human value? I talk about the importance of a family to have their lost person treated with dignity and respect. Yeah. For that loss to be valued correctly. Because if you incorrectly value something, if you value it too low, for example, then there cannot be justice. And the message that you sent to the family is that that person's value was less than, and I might give an example, my car. I might give an example of what a person's, because you're putting the value on it. You, the jury, have the right to do that and the obligation to do that. So it's very much a discussion, even though I have a discussion with the jury, even though they can't talk to me. That's my way. It's been my way for many years. Is I ask a lot of rhetorical questions and I talk as if you're talking with me. I'm talking through it in my mind with you about how we're going to get here, what we're doing. We're placing a value. What do we do to compare? How do you look at that? And then I've also been telling them throughout the whole case, there's been money all over. What are your experts being paid? $1,000 an hour? $1,000 an hour. You can multiply out $1,000 an hour. What is, so you're using stuff that you've already thrown out in the case to talk about money. But ultimately, it's about putting the value, not just putting up dollars and cents. The dollars and cents by themselves are just society's construct for creating a value that we can barter or use to get the things we want, to amass, to save up for our rainy days. It's all about human value. So that's how I do it. I take them through this history. I also tell them stuff like, I use what I'm wearing and I'll change it up. And I'll say, the most valuable thing on me right now, I'll tell you what it is. It's this little bracelet. When I was 50 years old, my best friend gave me this little bracelet and with a queen crown on it. And I actually got some other charms to wear on it, but I never put the charms on because this was how she gave it to me. And even though this is not the most expensive piece, if you were to look at, my rings are more expensive, this one has the most value to me because It is a human value. It means the most to me.
Okay, what's it worth to you? How would you ask a jury to replace that? Because it appears to me it's irreplaceable. It's about something that you got from a relationship with someone you care deeply about and who thought of you in a symbolic way and got that for you.
So the answer is that a lot of people use the concept of irreplaceable as a way to get out of placing value.
Okay.
And some of the jurors will have said that in voir dire, and I'll remember who they are. And I'll talk to them about it. And I say the problem with putting, there's a tendency to think like if this is irreplaceable, that therefore there should be zero. But if you put a zero, then now you have valued this as nothing. You value the life as zero. If you say it's irreplaceable and you put the value of zero, you've told the defendant, you've told the family, you've told society that this loss was nothing.
So when you're asking the jury, and what you're describing the jury to kind of work through irreplaceability, you are going to tell them what you think is worth.
I do.
And when you say that to them, you're saying what that means to the plaintiff. And how the plaintiff has been will inform them about what you talked about earlier, which when you're growing up, your relationship with money. So do you think that you have to teach them about the plaintiff's relationship and understanding of what this money is? Because they're the ones who are ultimately asking for it. How do you do that?
So I know a lot of people think that when you try a case that you're teaching the jury. I don't feel that way.
Okay, why not?
And I've been a teacher, right? I taught law school. That's not my mindset. My mindset is that I'm the vessel. I'm the communicator. I am communicating on behalf of my client. I am a vessel of communication. So my whole job is to get them to understand and to empower them to make a decision. So I also break down things so that they're digestible, and I also will give my suggestion. But I will also, I've almost always say this, and so it's no defendant is ever surprised to hear this. I almost always say, and I don't have to, but I do, and even if I didn't use these words, I'd use something separate. I can tell you there is nothing that the defense lawyer, John Black and me would like better than to go back in that room with you, sit around the table and hash this out. I would tell you my suggestions, he would tell you his suggestions, we could talk about it, but that's not how this works. Yeah. We're not allowed to do that. And I have done this 3 ways. I have not given a recommendation, and then afterwards the jury says, we really wanted you to give us at least a recommendation, whether we followed it or not. I can give you a recommendation, and then inevitably the jury will come back and say, we really felt like you were kind of just telling us what to do, and we didn't like that. And I say, so what I've decided over the years is I'm going to give you the way that I would think about it and some frameworks that I think might be helpful for you to address this, just kind of like some methods that I think would be helpful for you as you look at all of this. And you can do with it what you will. And so I believe in not just giving a number, but a way to do it.
Now, when you talk about giving them a way to do it, I want you to give me a couple examples, but it's true that you can't tell them to put themselves into the shoes of the loss, right? And help us understand why you can't do that.
That's called the golden rule, and it's just not allowed. And I've never even been accused of it.
Is it a good rule? I mean, ultimately, that's what they're doing. They're in that deliberation room going, what is my child's life worth to me?
They're not supposed to do that.
They are not supposed to do that in the jury deliberation.
Well, they don't get told. They're told that they should use the evidence. They can use their common sense and their experience and judgment, right?
Okay.
So, of course, you have people always use their own experience, and that there's nothing wrong with that. But the lawyer cannot weaponize
tap into their common sense and experience?
Well, no, the lawyer cannot weaponize the concept of, okay, my client that I just talked about lost a leg from the knee down. Now I want you to just pretend you're my client and this is how my client's feeling. Like, that's not allowed.
Okay, what do you do? What are the tools you use to give them the framework?
The framework changes depending upon the case.
Yeah.
But they, for example, they used my framework in Ride the Ducks.
Okay.
And that involved 50 plaintiffs. So I knew that they could not do this without having a system. And so I told them the system, which was you can grid it out. You know, I suggest that you write this out and you can have, you know, these columns and, you know, and that's why it took them almost 2 weeks to come up with the jury verdict because they went through that for every single person.
Did they create their own grid?
Yeah, they did.
And did you see the grid?
No,
ultimately?
because I don't see that. We don't see that. But
Did they tell you that they made a grid? And then the value system the framework you provided them, other than just the grid, what else did you tell them to use to determine money amounts?
I pretty much, I could read you my closing, but I just told you. I talked to them about money.
Okay.
What is money?
Okay.
What does it, what, you know, I don't want you to get sidetracked by money as a bad thing. Money is part of the human experience.
Okay.
This is where it came from. This is what it's supposed to represent. You know, you are basically putting a human value on a loss.
Okay. Okay. That's...
Everybody does things differently, but that's kind of a core of who I am anyway. I always believe, as you know, my motto is, you know, lawyers are real people too, and that's how I communicate, is I want to communicate on a shared level. Like, even if you are far to the left or far to the right, like, this is a human experience.
Yeah.
It's a shared human experience. So that's what I'm looking for, is what are the shared human experiences? I'm not looking to divide the jury. I'm not good enough to figure out, like, these are my leaders on this ahead of time. These are my leaders on this camp, and this is who I'm going to preach to in this particular way. I am looking at it more like, where's the common ground here? How can I present this in a way that will work with no matter the spectrum of what I'm facing in terms of a jury?
The second, the other question I have for you is, how did you, if you have, disabuse yourself of some of the values you had, or what your relationship was with money when you were a younger person, and how, because I feel that I still have that issue. Like, my relationship with money is, I'm working through it, and how do you move through that? Talk to me about that.
Just like you said. So what I do, and I don't do it all the time. It depends on if I feel this at the moment, you know, me in the moment. But especially when I was getting more used to talking about money in a real positive, because I think that you need to talk about money feeling nothing but pride that you're able to talk about it. Like, this is so wonderful that you get to do it, versus this is my least favorite part. And so, and I've heard people say, like, this is my least favorite. I've heard people
they say
in
that.
trial say apologizing that they have to talk about money. So what I have done is, if I'm still not confident under the circumstances, I'll say, I used to really have a lot of hesitation about talking to jurors about money. It didn't feel right. I was uncertain as a younger lawyer, as a newer lawyer. But I have changed my opinion. I think that this is an incredible honor to be able to speak about the value that you're doing. And I talk to them about the job that they're doing, because this is their job. Juries want to know how to do their job. That's why they listen so closely when you're talking about money. It's not that they're just trying to, at least when I do.
Yeah.
I feel like they're not trying to listen to me like, oh, she's trying to pull the wool over our eyes, or she's one of those greedy lawyers and they're just going to ask for this ridiculous amount of money, although some people might think that. There's so much lead up to it. I never just say, well, this value is this amount. I never say anything like this. I've thought about it in my mind, and here's the value of the case. Never do that. But I will say things like, Yeah, I used to not be comfortable, but I am now. And I'm going to tell you why.
Okay, so you tell them about it's a form of vulnerability.
You could certainly do that.
Okay, that's really good advice. Then what do you do when
They can tell when you're uncomfortable about
I mean, you just did. You called my BS in the beginning of when
I
we started
wasn't sure
talking.
what you were talking about.
You were like, "What is this guy talking about?" But it's just like it's a really uncomfortable topic to talk about.
But I think that we should, finish mine because I do have some questions about that.
Oh boy, no.
Are we done with this kind of? Do you have any other questions or thoughts about how to talk to jury about money, Mike?
No, not right now.
Yeah, just chime in if you do.
I mean, I think you made a good point about how juries will get very serious about their job. And I think that some people, I mean, when I was younger, I thought what you said about what people think about lawyers. I thought that they were just trying to get as much money as they can, and they weren't thinking about the clients as much. But having worked here for 19 years now, I know that that's not the case, and that I think money is, it is value. That's what it represents, and that I think juries, once they hear the experts talk about how money, well, I guess the loss that families or individuals have money-wise from some of the situations that they're in that we have to help them with, that juries can be more receptive to why it's important.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's a good point, Mike.
Yeah, there's a lot of discussion we can talk about money, but I do want to go back to you because you are a problem child.
I'm a problem child.
You're making the transition after 15, I guess, years or so as a public defender to plaintiff lawyer.
Yeah.
And, you're going from jail being the consequence or freedom.
Yes.
To money being, awarded by a jury verdict or settlement or not. It's a very different system. It's a very different result, for obvious reasons. And you're not comfortable in it yet. I'm just going to adjudicate that right now. You are not comfortable with this.
I think that's fair. I think adjudicating that is accurate. I am not comfortable with it. We're going to be going to a firm retreat, and we're going to talk about goals, 1 and 5 year goals, and I'm really struggling with that. That's personal stuff.
So let me ask you this, and maybe this is a kind of a jump off point. You tried the Summer Taylor case with me.
I did.
And I asked for money.
You did.
And how did you feel? Think about that. Like, how did it make you feel to hear me talking about money? Because I guarantee you, I went through a lot of the same thing.
I'll tell you what I was going through. One, I was trying to think about how I could be of help to you in preparing for your closing. And I was like, what can I share with her to help my partner? We're in the middle of a trial in making the ask. And I was having a lot of stuff that I could share with you that had to do about the case, about where I thought responsibility lay. And then when I started to turn that into money, my mind just sort of shut down. And I just didn't know what to say. Because, that case for me was really about a value judgment that the government made about protesters, and that they didn't use the level of care we thought they should have used to protect them. And I didn't know how to turn that into money, right? That concept of the case resonated deeply with me. Summer's loss resonated deeply with me. I wrote poems about Summer. and I was with Summer's parents. But I didn't know how to translate that into money. Like, for me, I was so connected to the emotion. Mm-hmm. That's part of the struggle, is turning that emotion into something tangible.
So I think you need to do what I did and kind of do your own journey and reflection of your relationship with money
I think
and
I
what
do.
it needs to be, because you are I disagree that a lawyer doesn't have an impact on the eventual verdict. I do think, as you've heard me say before, that lawyers take too much credit for the losses, and I think that lawyers take too much credit for the wins.
Yeah,
I think that they're, a lawyer that takes credit for the win without realizing that it's not their case, it's their client's case, is, whatever. But also, I think that lawyers that absorb the entire fact that they lost a case and it's completely their fault, I also think that that's, there's a balance there. It's a team approach. The client is in the team with the lawyer, who's in the team. It's all a team approach, and so.
I do agree
Yeah.
with you, Karen, that one thing you said was attitude and being positive about it. I think that's easy for me. I'm a pretty positive guy. I think what I can do is I think the process for me is going to have to be going into revisiting my relationship with money, and then start talking about it in a positive way. And then just naturally, when I'm talking about it with family, friends, colleagues, just talk about it in a positive way. And I think that's a good first step. And in doing that. But also, I got to go to court and just ask for it and see what happens. I got to throw myself in the deep end.
I'm going to give you some examples about money and why I like doing this job just the way it is. So last year or the year before, I can't even remember now, we settled the Black Lives Matter case.
That's right.
And we had 50 plaintiffs, and the city paid $10 million. And we had taken about 40% of them were pro bono.
Oh,
We didn't charge any fee on about 40% of them. But another law firm had asked to join us, and before they kind of bowed out of the case, but they had people signed up for a fee, and we had so many clients we didn't want any more unless they were going to pay a fee. So, but about 40% of them had no attorney's fees. They just had to pay some of the costs. It was a long case. It was like 4 years. I have never had such a diversity of clients in need before. And of course, there were 51 of them. Very similar to Ride the Ducks, but socioeconomically completely different. In Ducks, they were international students or tourists. Most of them were very well off. In Black Lives Matter, we had people that did not have housing.
Ah.
We had people that had pre-existing conditions, mental health. We had disabled vets.
yeah.
We had people that didn't get health care because they didn't know that they could go to the hospital because they had no money. And we had other people, like we had some college teachers, and we had some, news photographer. I mean, we had all walks of life. When that money was distributed, it had such a profound effect on them. And most of these people were not permanently injured. They were beaten, they were bruised. Some of them had some broken bones from the police. But most of them, really brought this case. It was a civil rights case.
Yes.
They went out to protest against police violence, and they were assaulted by the police. They felt so vindicated. They felt heard. They felt that they had gone through 4 years of having to turn over all their text messages and medical records, and they felt proud
Yeah.
that they had stayed together and seen this through, and that the system had recognized them. Irreplaceable. So the money, yes, did the money serve two purposes? Did hopefully some people now have some housing? I hope so.
Yeah.
But to me, what was just brought me to tears, because so many people they're protesters. So many of them were so eloquent, and the way they were able to express them. It was such a magnificent moment, because not that it was just $10 million. No, nobody received $10 million. Like, there was 50 people. It had to be distributed. And then you had, several $100,000 in out-of-pocket costs that we had been fronting, plus attorney's fees on the people that were not pro bono. That feeling from them, that overwhelming feeling of acknowledgement. Because, right, we all know that you've all heard from every single self-help book or psychology book that you've ever heard of, or podcast or whatever, that what people value more than anything is to be seen. To know that someone can see you and understand or value you or acknowledge you is like one of the most important things about the human condition. So getting that settlement gave those people that. So that's why I value what we do. That's why I value the fact that we were able to get as much money as we could in that circumstances. I valued, because I wanted them to have as much respect as possible. It did equal respect for them.
I think that that makes that just creates a whole different kind of dialogue in my head about doing my own thing to try to understand how money reflects respect. Feel like I feel heard, because I got to work through that process to be able to go. I got to feel the same level of respect, that the value of it is respect for me and being felt heard, so that I can go and ask for someone. Like, this money I'm asking you to give this person is because it means respect. I got to believe that. It's got to be authentic.
Well, it also changes you as a lawyer in terms of negotiation, and so they didn't offer $10 million off the bat. In fact, they didn't offer that at all.
Yeah.
We're talking nominal, and they didn't want to offer that. It took a lot of time. I personally knew that it had to be that amount for that case to be respected publicly, because this is a political case. This case is symbolic, and in fact, people still talk about it.
Yes.
10 million. There's a difference between 10 million and 8 million.
Yes.
There's an extra zero. There's an extra digit.
Okay.
I wouldn't go for 9.5. I wouldn't go for 9.75.
Okay.
I wouldn't go. They said they couldn't go beyond 9.9 because something, and I'm not supposed to say what happens in, good thing I don't have a good memory, because you could never say what happens in mediation. However, I can tell you what I thought, which was that it's a difference between 10 and 9.9. And so knowing that that's the conviction, knowing that the person that they're negotiating has a bigger thing going on, which is they knew why. They want the respect of having an 8-figure, not a 7-figure settlement.
And they're forever connected to a landmark case.
Yeah.
And they can tell their children, and their children can tell their children that they were one of those protesters.
Yes.
Yeah, so okay. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's right.
So, take away from this is money is a critical element of being a plaintiff lawyer. And if you are not comfortable with money or asking for money, then what makes you think that you can be comfortable and effective asking for money on your client's behalf?
You got to do the work. You got to do the self-work on money before you can go and ask other people for money.
All right.
That was good.
There you go.
That's a great job. Yeah.
Can I ask one thing about that case? When you started it, I was here when you guys discussed that, and you didn't plan to make money off of it. You planned to do it pro bono.
We did.
And I thought that was a big move for our firm, because we witnessed what was going on, and you guys got together right away and said, we want to do this. And like you said, I mean, eventually there was money that came our way because of it, but that wasn't the intent. And that's the thing, touching on what I said before, like most people don't think that. And you spending the beginning of your career working for people, I mean, you guys didn't really discuss the difference between public defender versus plaintiffs' attorneys. You aren't working for money at all when you're a public defender. Most people who are public defenders are making less than I am.
Yeah, it's true.
And they're swamped. I mean,
they have student debt.
The one time that I've had to go to a trial that had a public defender, they had a stack of cases.
Yes.
That was like the entire day that they were just going to be there.
Yes.
And it was like boom, 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 boom. They had subpoenaed me and never spoken to me. I got subpoenaed for something that I didn't even know what they were asking me to come for.
Yeah.
Because it was something that happened in the alley behind my house. But they had never spoken to me. I don't think that I've ever seen a witness that we haven't had be talked to and prepared and so on and so forth. Where when it's a public defender, so sometimes you might not have met that person until the day of their case.
Well, I think we should have a part 2.
We should have a part 2
Let's
because
have a
I
part
like
2.
what you just
We
talked
really
to.
kind of, we started off with me kind of hijacking it after Mo expressed that he really didn't have good thoughts about it. And I talked about like how I talk to jury, but money is a big subject. So there should be a part 2.
There should be a part 2.
All right.
Yeah, great.
Interesting.
That was good.
Well, that's all for today.
Until next time.